Imperial-Majesty.
Peace, love, and light. Islam.
My question is on monetary policy.
Monetary policy?
Yes.
Proceed, please.
I would like to know, in your opinion, what is the best monetary policy that Moors should get into, and what monetary policy should Moors not get into, and what hasn't worked for the Moors in the past, as far as monetary policies?
Any monetary policy that is based on non-substance is a non-starter. Any monetary policy that is predicated upon the ability to artificially create and maintain inflation is a non-starter. So if it's non-substance in nature and it allows for the ability for folks not to be able to transfer title or convey title when someone is making an acquisition of an item, well, that's a non-starter. It's all about fair exchange. If you don't have fair exchange, then someone is being robbed. So any monetary policy that is designed to allow folks to do things where there is no intrinsic value is a non-starter. These are the items that are used, these are the tools that are used to cause a folk to be economic slaves to those that's implementing those particular instruments, where parties get reduced to using convertible commercial instruments that could be securities or could be bonds or could be notes or other evidences of debt. You do not convey title where there is no intrinsic value that has been traded. It has to be fair exchange or there is no conveying of title. So if someone wants to acquire property, they should not be in the business of making an offer to pay but not making the payment itself. They should not be in a position where they are creating additional debt, where they are acquiring mere use of as opposed to actual ownership. So monetary policy like we have in the Amexem-Moor-Empire is predicated upon substance, intrinsic value, tied back to a substance-based economy, a substance-based economy tied back to an agriculture-based economy, as opposed to an industrial-based economy. Industrial-based economies require parties to engage in what they call, quote-unquote, consumer activity to maintain it, whereas parties engage in the acquisition or alleged acquisition of whimsical items, where parties have the option not to acquire said whimsical item and still survive, which means if folks don't do that, there's going to be a decline in said consumer activity. And that will lead to economic issues that can lead to economic collapse, which could lead to civil disorder, anarchy, and the like. So monetary policy is dramatically important to social stability. So your monetary policy has to keep things in place in a manner where it is to the long-term advantage of those participating in that particular economy that monetary policy is influencing. So in short form, that's the best way to answer your question. Do you have a follow-on question for me at this point?
Yes, in relation to economic and monetary policies, how does it differ through an independent nation to a dependent one, or a dependent territory that's underneath of what might be the one that might have the main control, or that other dependent nation or protectorate of that?
The whole purpose that parties engage in non-substance-based economies, as I said earlier, is to create, by default, economic slaves. These are parties who are no longer constituents to that which is organic. They are now default franchisees unto a franchise. Whoever the franchisor of that franchise is, more than likely is the party that is instituting and maintaining the non-substance-based economy generally based upon that which is whimsical or industrial based. There's nothing wrong with having an industrial based economy, or rather, there's nothing wrong with industry being part of your economic activity. You should always have an agriculture-based economy that is buttressed by industrial and service components. But getting back to answer your question though, parties that are working to get folks to be economic slaves, they don't have an interest in seeing folks get out of that particular economic servitude. They need them to continuously use their instruments that create debt, that create the abilities for them to artificially create inflation or deflation, both of which can destabilize parties. And now they have parties dancing like minuets, marionettes, if you would. They're getting them to dance to their tune. And whoever controls the economic policies for folks, by default, controls their land and labor. So it's inherently dangerous for folks to put themselves in a position where they can be economic slaves with no way out. And parties nowadays, they just basically volunteer into it because they don't know any better. Well, let me rephrase that. Folks used to do that. Some are starting to wake up now to particular games that have been played. So now you have these quote-unquote bankers that play games and they control quote-unquote central banks by default and manipulate what happens in the areas under the influence of those central banks, which leads to maintain in perpetuity the economic slaves. So they use the media that they control as one of their divisions, like artillery, and they use the policy enforcers, their infantry, to keep parties within particular lines. And as they do all this, they create more and more levels of debt by way of what some refer to as bonds, which are basically securities. And someone has to be the surety for those securities, the default economic slaves. And parties will play this game all day until they decide to stop. Now, parties, because they're impatient, want to borrow and play this quote-unquote credit game tied back to creating debt. So what they borrow to pay, or allegedly pay to acquire something, that unit that they acquired now costs much more because of all the interest. They got it here and now, but they created all these debt scenarios. And what happens in their mind? They replicate it over and over and over, and now they're in over their head. And they have this payment, that payment, this payment, that payment, or alleged payments, because it's generally in commercial instruments as opposed to money. So you basically didn't buy it, you just have mere use of it, which means it can be seized, or you can forfeit it to whoever is doing the seizing. And on top of all that, you're now trading like a hamster on a wheel. They want you to do so-and-so for 30 Earth years for a death pledge, or mortgage, death pledge, or whatever games folks are playing to have all these items. Instead of doing as you should. You work for it, you raise the funds, and then you get it in actual substance, and you get it in one fell swoop where you're not paying or engaging in usury. Why would you do that to yourself? Because you were impatient? Folks don't think beyond 20 minutes and they're paying the price for it now. They stop those two things, you can change a whole lot of dynamics and change lives, save lives, and improve the quality of lives. Instead of folks going crazy because they're saying they don't have enough because of how they think and everything having to be monetized, which is why on my watch the Imperial Government has made significant changes. Not everything in our venue is monetized. We're taking away, quote unquote, mortgages. We're taking away so-called rent. We're going back to certificate of occupancy, as some would say.
So basically breaking that scimitar of the usury game.
Broke it a long time ago and made sure that there's no possible way for it to ever come about in this jurisdiction and venue. Article 6 of our Constitution makes it plain. No constitutional monarch can ever propose any of the tools. We don't do non-substance-based economy. We don't do non-substance-based quote-unquote currency. We only do substance-based money. We don't have quote-unquote credit here. We don't have banks here. We only have depository system here, not banks. We don't have fractional reserve banking, none of that. You have to have substance or private capacity. You can do things by barter. There is no point of entry to allow for the Imperial Government to ever engage in the creation of legal fictions and or, if you would, parties that are now franchisees to a separate franchise that is now being used for bonding.
And that's tied back to the Amexem-Moor-Empire Constitution as well as the common and Sharia law of the jurisdiction.
Precisely, because we don't do quote-unquote usury. And that's the best way I know how to answer your question. I thank you for it. With that, I say, peace, love, and light, much prosperity be with you and your family and those whom you love and those that love you. And Islam.
Islam.